You're listening to The Big Lift, the podcast of WebTrends Optimize, the CRO solution that enables marketers and developers to maximize the ROI on their digital properties. WebTrends Optimize is a powerful, feature-rich and easy-to-use solution, all delivered within a fixed-price contract with no additional cost for increased functionality ever. During these podcasts, we meet some of the key influencers within the marketing and conversion world to understand their roles and examine their challenges. The importance of customer experience has never been more paramount. A recent PwC report found that 32% of users will walk away from a brand they love following a single negative experience. So today I'm talking with Oliver Walker, co-founder and managing director of Hookflash Analytics, about how to build a conversion engine that concentrates on building better engagement to ensure higher levels of customer satisfaction. Ollie, why Hookflash? Why the name Hookflash, first of all?
That's an interesting question, actually. And the short answer is that there isn't anything too clever behind it. We embarked on setting up the company, and you start with the company name, get all the exciting bits up front, and we toyed with: do we go with something really clever, play on words? Do we, go and try it into old Latin or Norse English and try and find a word that means insights or impact? And we thought, actually, you know what? Let's try and do this as quickly as possible. There's a lot of things that we need to do, and at the end of the day, if the name is reasonably snappy and memorable, 80% of people will say that's rubbish anyway, but use it. And it was one of the co-founders. Their father had actually been a consultant and had their own company called Hookflash quite a long time ago now, and the company had been dissolved and they're no longer using it. And he just said, what about something like Hookflash? 2 words, kind of snappy syllables that go together, and as I said, it's reasonably memorable. And myself and one of the other co-founders actually just said, well, shall we go with Hookflash? Any objection there? So it's a little bit of a homage to his dad, who's no longer with us, and as I said, it meant that we didn't spend too long debating clever names that would later become a bit unwieldy to use if you had different services or change your mission statement.
It's quite interesting that you say that, because I was reading your LinkedIn profile the other day, and it said that you did a dissertation on the effect of recognition heuristics in guided decision making.
Yeah,
I would have thought you'd probably spend a bit more time on the title if you thought it was going to be the one that was going to be recognised more frequently.
Well, that is something. As I say, I think you can tend to overthink these things. So the importance of recognition was my undergraduate thesis, yes, and it was effectively me going down the street and giving people pairs of names and asking who they thought was richer from memory, and I would choose a kind of low red celebrity and some business titan that you kind of have never heard of, and people thought that the names they'd heard of had more money. So that did show an impact. But as I said, I think with the naming of businesses, you can spend a lot of time overthinking it. And even since we have set up Hookflash and we've started to become partners, with organisations like yourselves and others, and then you go and look at those partner pages and you think, why didn't I call myself Aardvark Analytics and be right at the top? I'm right in the middle here. And as I say, I think you have got to just accept that it's in the grand scheme of things, as long as people remember your name, and it gives you the flexibility to add disciplines in and change what you may do, then you can tick a box there.
Because you went on from Reading University to Bangor University and did consumer psychology, is that correct?
Yes.
That must help an awful lot in what you're doing now.
Yes, well, it certainly led me. It's a kind of cyclical. It led me to where I am, and it also has some impact still to what we do at Hookflash and what I have done in my career. So it was the first and only consumer psychology degree at the time. So as you said, I had done a psychology degree, reasoned that I didn't really want to be a psychologist in the clinical sense, but didn't really know what I wanted to do, but had been exposed to some interesting experiments that was happening in real life in stores. So there's lots of research around the psychology of store layouts. Everyone's familiar with the fact that there's chewing gums at the checkout, but things like the supermarkets will change the size of floor tiles down higher ticket aisles so that the trolley itself will move a lot more. So you have to go slower down those aisles and browse the TVs or whatever the more expensive items are. Or the other one that I remember is an interesting experiment where again, a different supermarket played music down the wine aisle, and they were interested to understand whether that music they played impacted the wine that was bought, and they found a pretty strong correlation actually. So if they played Spanish music, then Spanish wine was bought at a greater rate than normal, and the same was seen, I think, for French and German music as well. So I had this view of understanding what people do. And obviously, psychology is all around the behaviour of people. So Bangor was the first university to offer a consumer psychology and business degree, and it did blend those two core competencies. So there was a few modules borrowed from the business school around marketing principles and business management, and a few of the standard psychology ones around research and statistics, which again have a kind of nice tie in now with testing. And then the pure consumer psychology modules were very much focused around nudges and persuasive techniques and things that resonate better with consumers, and even going down to colour. And there's a neuroscience module that was very much focused on the visual cues that you can use to try and drive attention, try to drive action. And so, although it was quite a long time ago now, I'm not sure if all of that still stands up. But certainly it led me to the world that we're in. When I came out of that degree and was talking to recruiters, I was aware that this fanciful job I had experimenting in supermarkets was quite hard to find, not least because I didn't know what it was called. And I still don't know what it's called, actually. But the recruiters at the time were saying, well, actually, a lot more of the investment is going into the online world, and you can do some of this sort of experimentation, or you certainly can get a lot of data about what's happening, and you can use that to understand what users like and what users don't like, and where there may be potential opportunities to impact that behaviour and help their journey. So, as I say, it led me to it, and we do still use plenty of those persuasive techniques in our tests today.
So, basic question: why do you believe that customer experience is so important?
Well, the customer experience, effectively it encapsulates a brand's relationship with their website visitors, their customers, their potential customers, and to deliver a great customer experience is also quite difficult to do. And of course, what that means is that if you can do it right, then you have a big opportunity and you can win. And there's been lots of studies. So I think I referenced one in a blog piece recently. Around a third of users will walk away from a brand if they have a particularly poor experience, even if they love that brand. And there's a lot of those other stats around that impact there. Accenture have done a lot of work in this space, and a lot of research suggests that customers want brands to adapt quicker to meet their needs. They want to feel like brands they engage with understand them, and everyone knows the stats around how much more expensive it is to win a new customer than to keep an old one, and the fact that those existing customers tend to spend more as well. So the first point there is that it's just a really big opportunity. The more personal you are and the more you treat people as a person with an understanding of previous interactions and start to respond accordingly, then you've got a big opportunity there to build strong relationships. And the other part of that is that the customer experience is not just important from a customer perspective now. The big search engines have recognized that it's a really important aspect of a good website, and so they have increasingly started to reward websites, in this instance specifically, that load quicker, that provide a better customer experience in order for the user to find what they're looking for. So that has actually really added fuel to the fire of the importance of customer experience. And then, as I say, that there's just an incredible number of brands that could be doing more in this space, and particularly more in the way that users are seen across channels. And so I always talk about this concept of symmetrical messaging, or this idea of a user that finds a brand or wants to go to the brand's website through a particular channel, and then they land on a landing page. And that experience can either be incredibly smooth and seamless. The user clicks on something and they land and they get what they expect, or it can be really clunky. And it really surprises me that how frequent that still is. And we have a client who, just before we started working with them, I signed up to their newsletters and started to immerse myself a little bit in the brand. Got an email from them, and the email was just saying that a particular colour was the new colour for this product that they had. And I thought, great, let's see what happens when I click through to a product listings page with a relatively small number of products, about 8 products on there, and one of them was preset to be the colour in question, and some of them didn't even have that colour variant available. And so as a user, it just feels very incongruous. It doesn't feel smooth. So there's such a big opportunity there that I guess I say, if companies who can start to take strides in this space will really start to move ahead of their competition.
If I can, I'd just like to take you back a couple of minutes, where you said that 33% or whatever it was, a third of users will walk away from a brand they love following a negative experience. Would that be more an impactful experience, or would it be an erosionable experience? So in other words, it's over 2 or 3 different engagements with that brand they get dissatisfied? Or are you saying that actually it could have much more impact in that they do something wrong and that's it?
Yeah, so the research in that instance spoke about a single poor experience, and you can only imagine that is compounded, and the number of users that would walk away if they get a series of bad experiences would increase. But yeah, it just goes to show that the expectations are very high, and we talk a lot about being in the expectation economy, and it's difficult for brands to reach those expectations. But obviously having a plan to get there and taking steps to get to that point is really important.
So, having kind of said we've determined that customer experience is an important factor in not just website design, but the whole experience of a customer, being it physical or being online, does there seem to be a way of being able to follow a methodology or I suppose a plan, a template, to be able to get from where you are to where you need to be? Or is it just guess here, guess there, or a hypothesis here, let's try that? Or is there something a bit more fundamental in that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it definitely starts with a plan. And of course, when we talk about the customer experience, ultimately that is every interaction that a customer can have with a brand, and the bigger the brand, the more touch points there are, and that is a very, very difficult job indeed. Requires a lot of planning, technology, data, and ways of working internally. But it all starts with reviewing the most closely connected channels and what the best plus ones are. Remember, an old chief strategy officer of ours used to always talk about the plus one strategy. So if you've got one channel, what is the next place that you can start to connect that together to make sensible decisions, make big impacts? And so where we always start as an analytics business is within the data and with digital analytics, and that's always got to be at the heart of understanding, because it allows you to see what customers are doing on the website and where there seems to be barriers and what they seem to be trying to do, what seems to be helpful in helping them to get there. But also you can understand a lot about the customer themselves with these different tools now. There's lots of ways to self-identify customers, because you have quizzes on your site, or because of the content they look at, and you can start to classify those. So that's really the foundation. And we often talk about where else can you get diagnostic information, where else can you start to think about the user experience. And we spoke about, from a search engine's perspective, it's a bit more technical, and it's a lot around site speed and the technical aspects of how quickly content loads. So you can easily start to plug in SEO as another channel to say, this extends our understanding of how the site performs and how it delivers from a customer experience perspective. And then SEO is actually where you can start to make those immediate changes. So if you can see the website loads too slowly, you can start to understand why and start to immediately change those. And that's not something you need to test, because it's fairly binary. But with SEO and with the user experience on page, you will start to have hypotheses of whether you need to change the names of headings, whether you need to have more text to describe your product or to describe your service, whether you need to have less text. And that's where we talk about SEO going hand in hand with CRO or experimentation, because although you're, from an SEO perspective, trying to make a change for both the search engine and the user, experimentation is where we can actually start to make sure that any changes we are making are not harmful to the users who are coming to the site. So experimentation really takes the hypotheses that we've got from an SEO perspective and hypotheses that we have from a digital analytics perspective on where we think the website or app could be improved, and then start to make sure that we are making the right decisions by testing those. And that power is really in the synergy of those three disciplines coming together.
Is there any one that's more important than the other, do you think?
There's not an order of importance per se, but I think it's about the order of the process that is important, and that's going to depend on a brand's maturity and where they are now. So we work with plenty of clients who've got lots of ideas on things that they want to test and just want to dive straight in and just test the things that they're guessing may work better, which is better than not testing at all. But it's much better to start with the data, as I said. So we find that data-driven hypotheses are about twice as likely to lead to a statistically significant result. They're more likely to yield a winning variation, and that means that we are more likely to learn what works well. So we would always suggest that you start with the data and see where that leads you in terms of what you need to do. And I say SEO is often a standalone discipline, or it often is talked about with paid search under this broader banner of search. But there's no point rolling out changes from an SEO perspective, as I say, which help search engines but harm the conversion rate. So I think that needs to be done simultaneously. And what you'll find as you start to join up these disciplines, the relative importance and the order of what you're doing will flex. So you'll do a big insights piece, you'll do a big user journey analysis, and that, at that point, analytics is the most important thing. And then as you move into making some decisions around what to test, SEO and the CRO side of things start to become more important. And you know, analytics is there to monitor the results of tests. So and that order of process, I think, is more pertinent than order of importance.
Because you mentioned a little earlier about acquisition being, the driving force for many companies. How does that fit in? Does that fit in as an adjunct to SEO, or is it something that's just a kind of a quick fix to get people to your site?
Well, the paid media world is incredibly linked. And as I say, when we talk about customer experience, there's lots of channels. You can bucket all of your paid media into something. You can have your CRM, you've got the on-site experience, you've got all of the offline channels. So paid media is an incredibly important aspect of the customer experience. And it goes back to the point I made around symmetrical messaging and helping to smooth a user's landing effectively onto the website. So the paid media world can stand to gain a lot by also working with the experimentation team and making sure that the landing pages are well optimized and indeed personalized relative to the cohorts of users that you're speaking to and their interests. And the great thing about the experimentation world, and what I really love about it, is that it is a accelerator to all of the other channels. So if you improve the bounce rate on your landing page and you improve the number of people who go through the site to complete the actions that they want and that you want them to, you will increase the effectiveness of your paid media, you will increase the effectiveness of your CRM campaigns, and obviously you'll make a lot of friends along the way.
A question that I've asked a couple of guests on my podcast is one that says, do you feel that companies need to reallocate ad spend to acquire better technologies and expertise in the whole customer experience element?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm biased there, so could very easily go with just a straight yes. But the reallocation of ad spend, again, I think it goes back to priorities and it goes back to where you're seeing effective spend. So on the one hand, as I say, any incremental percentage points you add to your conversion rate will improve the ROI of your marketing or the ROAS of your marketing. So in many respects, get the website working as hard as possible before you pump a lot of money into these paid media channels. But knowing how businesses work, and from a common sense perspective, a lot of businesses will be running with large paid media budgets already. And it becomes a point, I think, of diminishing returns. So that's a question for each client to look at from their own media's performance perspective, to say, well, we know that there's a kind of a minimum amount that we can invest, and if we invest at that and we get a very healthy ROI, and we could continue to invest more money or try different channels, but actually, where do we start to think optimizing the landing page and getting the conversion rate of the website up higher will pay off better because we'll get incremental revenue? So, would I recommend that if brands are spending over £1 million on advertising a year, but not investing in landing page optimization, should they be doing something there? Yeah, definitely. Is it worth spending 6 figures on a complex personalization tool and a bunch of services? If you've not done some of the basics, then no.
One of the things that I suppose it's petering out a little bit now is this whole question of web development, web experimentation, all this sort of thing was kind of thrown a little bit of a spanner in the works with the implementation of GA4, where Google have kind of changed the rule set, if you like, for doing analytics. Has that taken away a lot of the impact that you're trying to be able to develop from a experimentation process and things like that? Are people just have been too busy getting a house in order, I suppose?
Yes, I mean GA4 has definitely dominated the conversation for a while now. I think it's always been the case to a degree. So I remember that when I first started to get into this world in 2010, I'm not a developer. I'm not a technical person when it comes to the setup of these digital analytics tools myself. And I remember getting access to my first clients, Google Analytics, and going, great, I'm going to go and start analyzing the data. And you always need to start with an audit or a check of the data. And there is nearly always something wrong with the data, or if there's not something wrong, it's probably more common, there's a lot more that you could have set up. So it's always been the case that anytime we speak to a client and the initial purpose of the conversation is to focus on improving the customer experience or running A/B tests or just running an insights piece on the user journey or a particular part of the user journey, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on what you like, it always goes back to, well, what state's your data in and do we need to do anything there? So what GA4 has done in that sense has been a very big kind of rock that needs to be moved, because, as you say, everyone has had to consider what to do, whether to make the switch, because it is really more of a switch than it is a simple upgrade. It's a fairly different tool in the way that the tracking works and the interface looks. Do they move to GA4? Do they move to an alternative? And that has been a big focus for a lot of the clients that we've been speaking to. And it's meant that things like the sunsetting of Google Optimize, which is now just about a month away at the end of September, is really paled in comparison. There's been a lot more of a focus and a lot more noise about GA4 because it's on so many more websites. That has got a little bit lost. And of course, it also depends on how big the organization is. So we work with some organizations where one person is responsible for both sides of things, and they are the brands that have been most impacted by GA4 because they want to get the tool set up and they want to get their team trained and they want to have confidence in the data. And so it's really taken up their focus, and they've maybe put some of the testing on the back burner. Whereas in some larger organizations where the teams are a bit separated out, GA4 is one team's problem and not another team. So it does feel like we're reaching the kind of, or over the hump, or certainly coming close to that being the big focus. Has been in the last couple of months. Feels like clients are more comfortable in GA4, and that distraction is now starting to move into the rearview mirror, hopefully.
That's good. Just going back to the whole aspect of this kind of process that you've gone through, which is digital analytics plus SEO plus experimentation drives conversion. I think many of the larger organisations are already doing some of that, if not all of that. But smaller brands must find it difficult to be able to afford the time and the resources and the effort to make that move kind of effective. If resources are tight, do you think it's better for them to do one thing well, say SEO, or all of the other things that you've mentioned previously, but to a lesser degree?
Well, I would say that because they're so interlinked, it's a little bit similar to what I said before. I think you want to be doing a bit of all of it because they are mutually beneficial, but they do serve slightly different purposes. So if you take something like making changes to the website, you either test those changes or you don't. I've seen a lot of people talking recently about this Harvard Business Review meta-analysis. It found over 10,000 experiments that 90% of the time, or 9 out of 10 times, the change that was made to the site didn't do anything at all, didn't do anything positive or really anything negative. So that's just massive. So there's a lot of organizations who will be investing in developing their website that should be testing as a matter of course, because otherwise they're very possibly just throwing money away. So that feels to me like every organization that is investing in their website, which is going to be a very, very high proportion, should be doing the testing side of things. As I said, we know from the testing backlog, and we in my last company and now with Hookflash as well, we have a testing backlog where we basically store the results of every test. We don't care about the brand, but we want to know what the test was, where did it run, was it based on data or not, what impact did it have, was it statistically significant, and we store that and we can start to understand these trends. Because we have done that, and we've seen the importance of data-driven testing, that is then sort of daisy-chained on from my last point. So any organization that's developing their website should be doing testing. Any organization that's doing testing should ideally be doing a degree of data analysis to inform that. And that can be on-site surveys, that can be using tools like GA4 or Adobe Analytics or Mixpanel that are a bit more aggregated, or it can be the kind of full stories, hot jars, content squares, where you're getting some session replay and you get the heat maps and whatnot. Yeah. So again, I'm going to advocate for that. And then the final point there, which is very much around SEO, is if you're going to make changes to the website to improve the user experience, you also want to understand that SEO impact. And so something as simple as adding a widget to the site, because you believe that adding something that says this many people are looking at this product right now, or this many people bought this product in the last week, you think that as a persuasive technique, that urgency or that scarcity message is going to work better. So you decide to invest in a plugin to improve the conversion rate of the site and improve the user experience. You want to be mindful of what impact that has from an SEO perspective, because how much does that slow the page load time down by, and does that impact your SEO side of things? So again, it's a daisy chain that bleeds into this, and I think there can be a perception that all of this is very expensive, but as I said, there's lots of tools available, and many of them are very low cost or free, and then whether you can coordinate a team internally or work with an agency on a proof of concept, these things don't have to be tens of thousands of pounds a month. They can be much more affordable and well structured to start to do the right things early on, and build the foundations for bigger and more sophisticated programs as those smaller businesses hopefully grow.
There's an old, and I can't remember, a Greek philosopher that said that the only constant is change. And I think over the last 2 years, perhaps even 18 months, there's been far more change in this experimentation world that we live in. So we've got the implementation of GA4, we've got Google Optimize being sunsetted, and now we've got ChatGPT hanging over the heads of lots of marketers and content creators that are thinking, actually, is that going to do me out of a job? What are your thoughts on ChatGPT?
Well, yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Interestingly enough, I was chatting to a couple of the colleagues yesterday about it, and it feels like it was there was such a spike in talking about AI and ChatGPT, even just 6 months ago, and there seems to be a little bit less chat already, as maybe people have played with it enough and kind of come up with some silly ditties about colleagues or friends. And I know that's what I did. From a professional perspective, I think there's clear applications, in my view, for tools like ChatGPT and generative AI in the experimentation and the sort of customer experience space. And there are also areas where I think it's less suitable. So this idea of just being able to churn out lots of content using something like ChatGPT, and does that impact your SEO? Feels to me like something that the search engines will cotton onto pretty quickly, and brands who are just using these tools to create a load of content to look more relevant for certain terms will presumably not benefit as well. So Google's always been very good at closing loopholes around SEO. There's a lot of black hat techniques around keyword stuffing or cloaking that have come to the fore, and Google has found ways to penalize or to not value websites that are doing that. So I think that's quite likely to happen, that if there is too much content that clearly is written only by these AIs, then there's even just a basic lack of effort from that brand on trying to create value for the consumer. So I can imagine that.
Sorry to interrupt. I think Google are looking at an AI watermark, aren't they? To be able to put that stuff that they find, they can just watermark with this has been generated by AI technology.
Yes, I got a notification on my watch yesterday when we were at the pub that's what sparked our conversation about AI yesterday. So I think that feels eminently possible that the search engines are able to do that. And from a common sense perspective, again, it kind of always comes down to, is that valuable for the consumer? And some fairly vanilla content that's spat out by an AI is probably not. So I think that may be an area where it's less applicable. In an area where I think it is interesting, and I've not seen too many technologies that are utilizing this yet, is in this area of being more personal, delivering a better customer experience, and in personalization, is how can AI be used to create more ads, more web pages, more content, which are suitable for different users. And that's where there'd be more brand input into the creation of the sort of template, but the AI would help to speed up the ability to create some of these variations that would allow you to be more personal to users. Because again, when we talk about customer experience, what that naturally leads into is actually getting into the world of personalization, which is a very, very big topic, of course. But one of the big barriers to personalization is being able to create assets, whether they're ads or web pages or something else, that speak to the different groups of users in the most appropriate way. So I think there's an angle there where some tools will start to use AI to support with that, because that's a kind of clear problem, and there's a clear way that the AI can help as a solution.
So just taking almost back to the first conversation we had when we talked about an impactful experience losing customers. This may not be within your remit of customer experience, but once you've lost a customer, how easy is it to get them back, and what tactics can be employed to regain their trust?
Well, I think the really important thing with a point like that is, why did you lose them? How significant was it, and what relationship did you have with them? So if there's a data breach, with your bank or an organisation that holds sensitive information about you, then you would think that's falls into the category of very, very difficult to get them back. If you're more of a either kind of a commodity, or you're a consumer's mobile phone provider or a retailer, and you've lost someone because of a poor experience, maybe you keep spamming them with the product that the person bought from you, or you try to personalize in a way that is inappropriate, it's going to be more possible to win them back, certainly, but I think it's going to take time. And I think a lot of it is coming back to the key principles that we've been discussing already, which is understanding what consumers' expectations are. And a lot of the time, consumers' expectations are quite simple. They just want to be treated like a person, and they want a brand to understand them and be cognizant of the relationship that they've had with the brand previously, and try to understand a bit about their intent and what is an appropriate message to give them. Then deliver on that. Make sure that you are meeting that expectation and not overstepping. So not, again, spamming people with inappropriate messages, not trying to go too far in terms of personalization. And then I think the important bit that's really quite difficult to do is to kind of know when to speak and when to listen, and then when to take action. So you've understood that a user's come to the site, maybe they've bought a product from you, and so it's not appropriate to start to spam them with cross-sell right now, but thinking about when's it appropriate to drop that consumer an email or through another channel to say, we know that you've bought this product, here's how you get the best out of it, or here's how to protect it, depending on what the product is. Try to be anticipatory in what might be useful for a consumer, and show up, be proactive, and add value. So I think they're very human principles that are just quite difficult to do between a brand and a consumer, because it requires, as I said right at the top, the combination of data and analytics, of technology to be able to execute it, and on teams to be working together to achieve it as well.
I think that's a completely different topic that would be interesting to go down, but we haven't got the time today. Because I think that there's so many disjointed elements in organisations, which, for instance, returns versus sales just don't seem to be bolted together. But I think that we are all trying to be able to do the same thing, which is deliver a great customer experience, one which is repeatable, but not boring. You don't want to be bland. You don't want to be sycophantic. You want to be somewhere where actually the customer enjoys being there. And I think John Lewis had that sort of thing in its retail stores. Not sure whether it's got quite the same aspect on its online, but it's a challenge that continues to go. And I think, as you mentioned in one of your white papers, I think it's about the CIO of Dell saying that customer experience is the new battleground. I absolutely agree with that, and have agreed with that for some time, because you win or lose customers based upon their experience with you.
Yep.
And I think there are lots of companies that don't quite get it in that clear, defined way. They just kind of think, well, we'll just get more customers. We'll just keep churning that. We'll add more people in, do more PPC.
Exactly, and that goes back to one of the other stats that we've already referenced here, which is how much more expensive it is to keep on acquiring customers. 6, 7, 8 times more expensive than it is to deliver on that personal experience and build a good customer experience that means you continue to keep and engage and enjoy a good relationship with your existing customers, because the evidence is there that loyalty leads to greater engagement, greater revenue per customer than the average new customer that comes in and is perhaps a little bit more fickle.
So, Ollie, thank you very much for your time. It's been a really interesting discussion. I think we could go on perhaps for another 40 minutes or whatever. But it's been one of those topics which continues to deliver. It's the gift that keeps on giving, I think. But there is still a lot of people out there that haven't quite got it. And the more that we do to try and educate people around what's the best practice, what's good things to do, what's the best way forward, the better. But thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much for having me, John. It's a really enjoyable conversation.